Am I a street photographer? Am I a fashion photographer? Am I a freelance photographer? Am I a professional photographer? Am I a guy who just makes videos? What is the work that I do? Who am I, and how does this channel reflect all of the things that I could be positioning it as and all of the work that I actually really do in my life? The thing is, I've been a bit conflicted about how to position myself and my work and this channel to you to try and build a community around the work that I'm doing, and obviously grow the channel as well to get more people to watch and to subscribe to the videos that I'm putting up here. So in this video, I want to talk to you about 3 things that have been on my mind, and hopefully this is helpful for you as you're thinking about your own channel and your own work. The first is that genre labels like street photographer or fashion photographer are really, really limiting. That choosing a niche that's too niche is a challenge to really letting your work grow and your channel grow as well. 2, that street photography as a genre is such a large, all-encompassing term that it's almost useless to really classify yourself in that way anymore, and we'll get into that. And then 3, that there is a difference between professional positioning of your brand and your channel and your work versus personal identity. And those 2 things, while related, are not the same thing. So let me provide a little bit more background before we jump into the real meat of this video. And I apologize ahead of time if this video gets a little bit long, but it's something that I've really been thinking about quite a bit as I've been focusing on this channel and trying to figure out how to really focus in on the things that you would want to see, but that I also want to be making that reflect me as an artist and a creator and as a person. So I do some kinds of work in the photography world more than others. I get paid to be on set and do commercial fashion photography, right? I love being on set and working with models and supermodels and celebrities and actors to help a big production team put together and shoot the images that go into these big ad campaigns. It's amazing work, it's well paid, and it's really, really fun. But I also love working one-on-one with individuals and models who are not superstars, who are not celebrities, but are just normal people who want to also get nice, beautiful quality work to capture themselves, to make themselves look beautiful or sexy, or just capture a moment in their lives. It's really, really fun, and it's very fulfilling to meet people in that way and to give them work that they feel really happy with. I also love street photography. I really started in street photography. It was kind of the place that I began this journey about how do I learn to work this camera, where does my vision come from, what are the things that I respond the most to into the world, and how have I honed my craft to become more artistic over time. But I also work a full-time corporate job. I have a 9-to-5 at a big global company where I work with really smart people, and it's a really fun job, and I get to talk to lots of big brands about their brand strategy and their positioning. And so it's the overlap of those 2 things that have got me really thinking, maybe too hard, admittedly, on the positioning for this channel and trying to find a way to make content that is really reflective of all of the things that I feel like are part of my personal identity, but that I would also like to be sharing with people online, on YouTube, and on Instagram and other places. So I guess the summary of this is I do all of these things. I do fashion, I do street, I do portraits, and I have a full-time corporate gig. So who am I? What kind of photographer am I? It depends on the day. So that leads me to my first point, that genre labels like street photography, fashion photographer, portrait photographer, wedding photographer, film photographer, Leica photographer, these things are really limiting, or they can be really limiting. And I understand why we choose them, especially when we're getting started. It's a really easy way to identify a community that we resonate with and where we find inspiration from other artists. But we are photographers. I am a photographer. I do so many things, and the means by which I communicate the way that I see the world is through the camera, and it is totally agnostic of the sort of output of the camera. I'm just a photographer. So for example, are you a film photographer? I would say, no, you're a photographer who shoots on film. You choose film for a specific reason. You like the aesthetic, you like the process, you like the weight of having to see what the work looks like once it's developed and processed before you get the satisfaction of seeing the end result. But at the end of the day, The film doesn't make the image. It certainly helps it, but the image is still the image. It's about the composition, it's about the artistry, it's about your vision as an artist that you're channeling through the camera onto a piece of film. Are you a street photographer? I would say no, you're a photographer who is drawn to photograph the things in the streets. Are you a Leica photographer? Are you a Fuji photographer? I choose to use Leica quite a bit, especially for my street photography, but also a lot of times in my portrait photography. But in commercial advertising, I use a Canon, right? So I choose different tools that help me realize the vision or answer the brief that I've been given for myself or by clients. So am I a Leica photographer? I don't know that that's quite the correct term. I love Leicas, and I feel like they allow me to make images in the way that I want to make them. You may feel that way about your Fuji or your Sony or your Canon or whatever brand you choose to work with, but you are not a Leica photographer, a Fuji photographer, a Sony photographer. You're a photographer who chooses a certain set of tools because they help you do what you want to do and communicate your vision to the world in the way that you want to communicate it. So I understand that on social media and here on YouTube, we are encouraged to find a niche, to niche down and really lean into a certain type of a community. It certainly helps our algorithmic performance to be having our videos shown to more people, to show up on the home screen, etc., right? That is how we get our videos and get our content in front of more people. But I think in the long term, it can actually do us a bit of a disservice if we niche down too far. Yes, it's great to identify the pockets of photography that you are interested in, but don't go too far down the rabbit hole because, at least in my case, I found that suddenly I felt really limited with the type of videos I could be showing you and which parts of my photography portfolio I could start sharing online. I felt like I had to only share street photography work, and then I felt like I could only be sharing film photography work. And the reality is, I'm just a photographer and there's lots of things to do. So I think that niching down too far is something that potentially does us a bit of a disservice as artists. The second point is specific to a niche or to a genre. Let's take street photography, which is really the topic of this video, although as you've probably seen if you're still watching by now, this is more of a philosophical video about positioning and how we think about ourselves as artists and communicate that vision out to the world. So street photography itself is a huge genre, and it just continues to get bigger and bigger over the years. There are so many different types of street photography. There's conceptual, geometric, decisive moment-based street photography like Henri Cartier-Bresson. There is high contrast, black and white, light, shadows, and shapes street photography like Alan Schaller. There is in-your-face, flashbulb-oriented, gritty urban portraiture like the work of Bruce Gilden. There is the capturing the energy of the streets and sort of the serendipitous, practically divine moments of sort of juxtaposition and coincidence that artists like Gary Winogrand and Joel Meyerowitz use in their street photography. All of these artists are incredible, but they all do totally different things within this genre of street photography, which should be really empowering to us as artists in 2023 and beyond, that we don't have to limit ourselves to one type of work, that we can play around in lots of different places within this genre and find the vision that works for us. I shoot in a couple of those different subgenres, and I'm happy to do all of them. To me, it still feels cohesive, and I'm not, totally narrowed in on one place. So what does it even mean now to say that you're a street photographer? You're not a street photographer. I'm not a street photographer. I'm a photographer who sometimes uses the streets to communicate my vision of the world and the way that I interact with people and places in a way that is understandable to other people. I think that it's important to recognize that it's not just about the term and making work only through that lens. It's that our work is channeled through the lens of whatever genre serves the work, not the other way around. Now, the third and last point is that professional positioning or brand positioning is not the same as personal identity. And this is where I sort of, take my photography hat off and I put my sort of corporate brand strategy hat on for a minute, and I look for the overlap of these two worlds. So when we think about positioning, right, a brand or a company positions themselves in a certain way to connect with certain prospective or existing customers, subscribers, viewers, followers, whatever language you want to use for that. Positioning is a tool that a brand uses to connect with different types of consumers. And positioning, by the way, can vary depending on the type of person who you're talking to or targeting. Now, that is different than personal identity, and it does get a little conflated here in a place like YouTube because, this is a channel about me and my work, so my personal identity is part of the brand, but they're not exactly the same thing. I might make videos about street photography that are going to talk to the street photography community and people who consider themselves to work within that bucket. I may make videos about fashion photography and the work that I do there, or portrait photography, etc. And all of those things are part of my sort of worldview as an artist and a creative person, but they're not the same positions. And they position me as a brand and as a creator, as an artist, differently to different types of people. And it doesn't need to be complicated. And I'm not saying, think about this and, do studies and get down the analytical rabbit hole. Just understand that there's a difference between your personal identity and the positioning of your brand or your channel or your Instagram account or whatever your focus may be. And that the more well-rounded it is, while still being cohesive, I think the more representative of your personal identity that actual branding becomes. For example, I wouldn't send my street photography portfolio to a prospective fashion client. I wouldn't send my portrait portfolio to an art gallery that's looking to potentially display some of my best street photography work. It's okay to have multiple versions of yourself that is positioned in a very specific way to the different types of work that you like to make. It's okay to go after work in multiple places. The thing that is common across all of those is you and your artistic vision, your idea of how to create an image that generates impact, energy, and emotion to the end viewer, using your camera, using your skills, using your creative and artistic vision. So listen, I think this is probably a longer video than I intended. I hope that at least it gave you something to think about. As I said, I don't have the answers to all these questions. I just know that as I've been thinking about what do I want to do with this channel, how do I want to really take it seriously and give myself the runway to actually be able to take it seriously, to show all of the different types of things that I'm interested in within the photography world, it was something that was really on my mind about how do I think about this channel and my personal work to be positioned to the different types of people who I want to connect with me. Not everybody is gonna like the street photography content. Not everybody is gonna like a video where I talk about the Leica. Not everyone is gonna want to see the behind the scenes views of fashion shoots. It's more than just one thing. It's the sum of all parts. So, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot. I hope that that is the direction that this channel continues to move, to incorporate multiple versions of photography, because I do so many different things and I find each of them really exciting in different ways. And I hope that I've given you something to think about. So if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, send me a message, put a comment down below if you've got some thoughts on the topic. I really appreciate you watching, and until next time, peace.